Majesty, the Queen, has asked me to form a new administration, and I have accepted.
We can and will resolve the problems which now confront us.
The rise to power of Margaret Thatcher and Ronald Reagan saw an intensification of the Cold War. More than ever, politics dictated who received aid.
This has been a tremendously successful visit, and one which we shall long remember.
When news emerged that a Soviet ally was suffering a terrible famine, the West was reluctant to help, until the news became too big to ignore.
Dawn, and as the sun breaks through the piercing chill of night on the plain outside Coram, it lights up a biblical famine, now in the 20th century. This place, say workers here, is the closest thing to hell on earth.
Coram was, in a way, more like a concentration camp than any refugee camp that I'd seen before.
Seen from hell, frankly. I mean, most extraordinary place on the planet.
You drive along the plateau in Wallow to a place called Alamata, and then you start going up a very windy road, and then you appear right at the top on this incredible plateau. I suppose it's 2,800 meters, something like that.
It's the residue of a volcanic crater, vast undulating plain. People just going as far as the eye could see, just camping in the open.
You feel that, well, this is the end of the world, you know. People dressed in rags, sleeping under just a piece of cloth. It was a terrible situation.
There's not enough food for half these people. Rumours of a shipment can set off panic. As on most days, the rumours were false. For many here, there would be no food again today.
The pictures coming out of Ethiopia caused outrage around the world. Their impact was most immediate in Britain. The aid world was about to be transformed with the recruitment of pop stars to the cause.
The Ethiopian famine appeal will be boosted by sales of a special pop record. Over 25 stars sang for nothing at today's recording session in London, and all the proceeds will go to famine relief.
What made you have the idea of trying to get all these people together to make a record and a video like this?
Well, unlike other people, I'm in a position to do something else other than put my hand in my pocket. Boy George flew in on Concorde. U2 had one day off on a 6-month world tour, and they flew in from Dublin on the one day off.
It's an astonishing achievement to get all these people in one place at one time. How did you manage?
Millions bought the record. Millions more gave money. Band-Aid inspired a new generation to go one step further. To go and work for aid agencies to save lives in Africa.
Eyes to the camera. Good.
I think that because, and again, I don't wish to sound self-important, but because it's a media event and has been largely sponsored and created by the media, then it's going to be under intense scrutiny, and I think the chances of it going astray are very slim indeed.
Geldof and Band-Aid successfully shamed the British government to forget the Cold War and increase aid to Ethiopia. And to ensure that the donations from the public kept coming, Geldof and the aid agencies kept the message simple.
The object is to get food through every obstacle to people who are dying. And I don't care if I have to deal with Marxists or fascists or the multi-headed hydra beast of Fleet Street. I don't care who I have to deal with to do that.
I mean, Bob Geldof's great, you know,
catchline is always, but the children are starving, so, we need to feed them. I mean, any issue that was ever thrown at him, his response was always, but I'll show you a starving child and you've got to feed that child and don't tell me anything else at all. So Bob Geldof was the embodiment of the non-political approach.
This whole idea of popular culture joining together with the humanitarian cause, making it sort of cool to care, frankly. And obviously you can't do that if you get too deep into the politics, right? You've got to keep it a pretty superficial, pretty simple message.
Don't mention politics. Keep out of politics. Keep away from politics.
Our cause is so right, it's so simple, you don't need to think about this, you just need to pony up a little bit.
The politics just got airbrushed out of all this.
Death is all around. A child or an adult dies every 20 minutes. A tragedy bigger than anybody seems to realize, getting worse every day.
The story, as it had been presented by the press and most aid agencies, was simple. A drought had caused the famine. This was largely a natural disaster. But as ever, the truth was a little more complicated.
The famine in Ethiopia was not, rain failure. I mean, there was a bit of rain failure in it, but actually the Ethiopian government was fighting a war against the people of the north who wanted, in effect, to break away. So the government was deliberately starving that area, and that really had led to the famine.
They were destroying crops, they were stationing garrisons in areas and stopping people from moving around and trading and selling their food, etc., etc. And the combination of those things then grinds down a poor and drought-affected population to a position of famine.
The aid was saving thousands of lives in the refugee camps, but the food that had been provided by Western governments and the UN was also being used by the Ethiopian regime to fight its wars.
Vast amounts of aid rushed in, put a lot of food aid into that situation without adequate control and monitoring, which is what happened. You end up aiding and abetting a counterinsurgency strategy, and indeed feeding a lot of that army, and that's actually what happened.
There is quite a lot of evidence to suggest that the government was practically running the war on the basis of this aid operation. They artificially altered the exchange rate so that they could make a huge profit on all the money that was coming into Ethiopia. They siphoned off, in effect, a kind of tax, which helped them run the war.
8 months after Burke's BBC report, and with famine still raging, Geldof and Band-Aid sought to bring Ethiopia's problems to an even larger global audience.
I think that this is quite obviously the most important pop event ever. I don't think will ever happen again, that these bands get together on one stage, and they're doing it in the face of quite obviously the worst natural disaster in our history, so it is a magnificent gesture.
This is where you see the humanitarian international start really selling itself as proxies to the conscience of the West. And I think that that's in some ways what you really saw in the Ethiopian famine. There was an enormous amount of political complexity that got pasted over, and the humanitarians say, we did our best. What should we have done? We were just here trying to help famine. Please explain to me why that was wrong, that we wanted to help starving people. It's a very kind of naive argument because it insists that you're not supposed to think.
This is without doubt the most massive catastrophe that has been visited upon this planet.
People are not giving in the hope that these problems will ever go away. In reality, they're giving in the hope that that problem will go away from them.
that they will not have to worry about that problem. So you sign a check and you somehow forget the child that you've seen starving or whatever it is for the time being. And having paid your money, you then expect to be left alone. You don't want somebody bombarding with you. Do you think your money actually did any good?
As the aid program intensified, the Ethiopian government embarked on a policy it said would end the problems of famine once and for all.
Ethiopia's Marxist government has begun a huge operation to resettle people from the barren areas of the north to the more fertile land in the south.
The resettlement was ostensibly about relieving population pressure on the drought-stricken, famine-prone highlands and creating new model socialist villages down in the lush green south. But of course the other reason for doing that was the great Maoist counterinsurgency strategy of draining the sea from the fish, so draining all the population out of an area, and so you just had the rump of your enemy there and you could fight them more easily.
Tens of thousands of often sick refugees were being rounded up from the camps and taken away against their will. The Ethiopian government used food aid to help draw them in.
We were in a certain place south of Korem, just distributing dry rations. And then once the people had gathered in those distribution or relief centers, then they were easy to surround. So we were used as baits in a population trap, a bait to lure the people, to attract them to these relief centers, and then send them to, well, to the south of the country. Tens of thousands of people were dying in the process of being resettled, to the point that in '85 we realized that more people were dying from forced relocation than from the famine itself.
The combination of rock music and charity shows every sign of continuing to deliver the goods.
On the 13th of July 1985, over 1 billion people gathered to watch what was billed as the greatest rock event in history. But Ronnie Brauman, who had been expelled for speaking out against the Ethiopian government's policies, saw it all rather differently.
The tragic thing is that at the very time these concerts were taking place, forced relocation was at its peak. Hundreds of thousands of people had been abducted to be taken to places they didn't want to go to, and where they were dying by the thousands. And all this was happening when, you know, they were all singing and dancing and praising themselves and in a kind of self-congratulation attitude, which was just disgusting, absolutely disgusting. Sometimes, you know, when you're in this aid community, nice feeling community, well, you feel strange, you feel bizarre, because I didn't recognize myself at all. And I was watching this concert, I felt like, well, I don't want to be part of this world.
Ethiopia had raised the profile of humanitarianism as never before and inspired an entire generation to action.